Okay, my name is Melanie. I don't necessarily want to be a camera person, but I saw you kind of walking around getting a bunch of different angles. How do you know the right time to switch the angle, or do you just do it? Like, how do you go about that?
You have to play it by ear. What I do is the first thing I want to get is establishing shot. Now that would be, if possible, you guys and her in one shot. And then I need my cutaway shots or my B-roll, which would be individual shots, group shots. But then I must concentrate on her when she's talking. When I feel I have enough, then I move on. Now, you shoot in different ways. If this was going to be what we call a package, where the reporter is going to do interviews and a stand-up, then I have to shoot totally different. If it's going to be a voiceover, which is where the anchor speaks over the video, then I don't have to shoot as much, and I only need maybe a half a dozen shots really to tell the story, because the voiceover could be 9 to 12 seconds.
My name is Curtis. I have a question about how long does it take to edit this from, like, when you're in the field, how long does it take to edit it together to put on the 5 o'clock show?
Well, when I finish here, if they don't send me to another story, I go into the station, I ingest the video that I shot, because when we air, we're tapeless. Everything comes out of 2 servers. An editor will look at the video, pick my establishing shot, 1 or 2 other shots, and then Tamala speaking. And it can be done in a matter of a couple minutes.
And I'm actually going to ask you a question myself, if I can. We're going to turn this into an interview. One of the things that I'm amazed by is whenever there's breaking news, because we know that everybody's swarming all over it, how do you manage to get close enough to where you want to be for the reporter to do their live shot? And how do you think it out differently when you know I got 4 other guys out here trying to also get some good shots?
You have to play the scene by... It's hard to say just because there's no real game plan. Sometimes I will literally walk in with the camera down like this. So it doesn't give the image that I'm hostile, depending on whether it could be a shooting. Say you have an accident with a police officer. It's a very sensitive scene. If you go barging in, you're going to get the first shot, but then they're going to move you a block away.
Finally, if you're one of these guys and you're young and you're coming into the market and you want to make a place and you come into an Action News and you got guys like you who are experts, you've been at this for 30 years, what makes the difference between a kid that you really take an interest in and take under your wing and help, get going versus somebody who's not going to make it?
Well, the important thing to remember is that it's not all glory. It's a lot of hard work. You're cold in the wintertime, you're hot in the summertime, and it can be very boring. There's times when you could be on a story for 6, 7 hours for 15, 20 seconds of video, like if you're at a court case. So it's not as happy and nice as people think it is. Like, oh, you get to see the Eagles, you get to interview the Eagles, you get to do the Phillies, but it's business. You get in, you do it, you're always fighting the clock, because you have a deadline. And that's very important. You cannot miss page.
Hi, Ms. Edwards. Frank Perry here. I'm principal of Ben Salem. Thank you for coming here today. I really appreciate you taking this time. And I want to thank Brittany for helping to arrange this, and certainly Mr. Mills for just being part of OTN. What you see here, Ms. Edwards, is the best of Ben Salem. They're great, everyone here. When students get to a certain level and realize that they're in competition, how important is writing? And how have you felt that it has, is it a deal breaker? And if so, what can our students do to help become better writers?
Writing is everything. Because obviously, as he's talking about, you can be in a situation where you've got 3 or 4 other reporters on the scene. Well, what's going to make your piece better than somebody else's piece? Part of it will be the relationships and respect that you've established. Maybe somebody's willing to talk to you, but they're not willing to talk to other people. The other thing is, how do you make a story come alive? And you got to remember, this is the hardest thing out there. Somebody who's writing for newspapers or writing a book, they got words and words and words. And somebody can go back and look back over what they read. If they got to look something up, they can. With what you're doing, it's going to go by once. And either there's something about your writing and the way you're doing it that really grabs somebody's attention, or you lose them. It just feels pedestrian. It just feels boring. And a lot of that is thinking, and it's you're doing mixed things. On one hand, in television, you need to be conversational. You know, this is not the moment to find every 25-cent word you can, but you've got to come across as smart and compelling and different.
I'm Rich. This touches a little bit on behind the scenes or whatever. What's the newsroom like before the show goes out? Like, how hectic is it?
The newsroom before a show is, you got all these managers. We've got 15 million managers, and they're all screaming and running around, and I need page whatever. The video's not in. It's in ingest. What's going on? For the anchors, it's actually the calmest environment because we're down on set and we don't hear it. We just hear the basics. You know, we got the stagehand saying, you're coming up. Somebody saying, you know, go to this, don't go to that. But there is pandemonium going on upstairs.
I'm John. My sister's a news reporter. She's up in Scranton, actually, and I know that, like, before, you know, she got into the field, we took for granted, like, being home for the holidays, like, and, you know, now we try to figure out, like, is she going to be home for Christmas? You know, I was just wondering, do you find it hard to, you know, find time for family? Because I know it's a very hectic field, and I just wanted to...
No, and trust, you know, with what you do, you feel bad because over time, your parents are both upset about, are you ever going to come home again? And are you going to come home and not be asleep the entire time? I don't know if that's what it's like with your sister, but you don't come home, and when you do come home, you pass out. It is, and I think over time, people just have to kind of establish what matters to them. I think it's a good thing that the business has moved on, as have other businesses, where I think people accept that people want to be good parents, they want to be good spouses, and they understand people prioritizing, I need to go to my kid's soccer game, or he's sick, or I got to take him to a doctor's appointment or something. And I think other than that, it's up to you to kind of, find somebody who's willing to be supportive and understanding about a difficult schedule, as well as carving out for yourself, how do you turn it off? When you come home, you're home. When you're at work, you're at work. And that's pretty much all you can do.
Hi, I'm Megan, and I was wondering, outside of the newsroom, what kind of pressures are put on you of how you portray your personal life? Because you hear stories every so often about anchors getting fired for this, anchors getting fired for that. So what kind of pressures from your job are put on you, and how does it affect your personal life?
In most contracts, there's something called a morals clause. And it's pretty much a catch-all that says any behavior that's deemed unseemly, the station can say, oh, we're shocked. You can't work here anymore. Are there people who indulge in all kinds of personal bad behavior? Absolutely. But if it ever becomes public, then yeah, you're in trouble. And the way that I guess it guides you, and it's tough, again, in fact, we were talking in the car on the way over here, it's almost like you see yourself in a split screen. There's Tamala, who's on air and has to have straight hair and be dressed a certain way and wear makeup, and then there's Tam, who's usually wearing torn sweatpants with curly natural hair, and is a very different way around other people. And you know, he was saying you don't always realize people see both at the same time. You might think it's different, but yeah, people pretty much see you as that girl on TV even when they see you in your private life.
Obviously, you've shot a lot of like emotional stories. I mean, maybe you've covered Katrina, but is it difficult to go in there and, you know, see all these people that need help and not be able to help them at all?
I think for any reporter, you know, some of the news that you report, stuff done to kids, it's hard not to be in that moment, and certainly when people are in need. And they will come up to you and say, you know, can you tell my story? Can you help me in any way? And I think it's sort of a call that somebody makes in the moment, you know. And I think often on an emotional story, you'll see a reporter at the end and somebody's breaking down, they will literally give them a hug, you know, and they might even do it on air because that's a person who's clearly in need, and I think people understand that.
When you get a story and you feel uncomfortable with it, can you turn it down?
Ooh, you gotta have a really good reason with why you're uncomfortable with it. On very rare occasions, I think I've had stories that I just didn't think were stories. And I might have said, I don't really think this is a story, but I usually try to back it up with, but I think this is. Because what you're doing is you're calling your news director or assistant news director's judgment into question. And quite honestly, trust me, there are times when you go out on a story and you're like, you have got to be kidding me. But there's somebody out there who's going to think it's news and have enjoyed it and it's important. And your job is to go out there and do just as good a job as you would if it were a big trial or a catastrophe or a world-changing event.
When you're talking about reporting on emotional stories like this, and I'm sure you have on many, what's your trick? How do you hold it together? How do you not tear up or get too emotional that you're not giving a neutral opinion?
Usually when you're telling that kind of story, there's a level of how could this have happened? This is wrong. Whether you're telling a story about going someplace and there are dead animals, we've got a dog, we adore them. And when you tell a story about somebody who has been using dogs for fighting, and you've got dogs who are just being kept in terrible conditions and are dead, or you find out you're doing a story about, there was one the other day about a guy who, for reasons unknown, with an axe and a knife, killed his own mother and tried to kill his 12-year-old nieces. One survived and one didn't. It's a how dare you. And I think I tap into that. Listen to this. This is beyond the pale, this is unacceptable, and this is what happened. Police walked in and they said this is what had happened. A Burlington man was found to have done whatever. And I think in tapping into that, because those are going to be the two emotions that people feel, oh, that's terrible, oh, that's awful, and that just really makes me mad. And I think it's that level of, because people do look to you a little bit on how to feel about it, and almost as I don't even know the word, and you're confirming for them, this is not who we are. This is not what we do. This is not acceptable.
Hi, I'm Doug. I was just wondering, looking back on your career in media, was there any opportunity or chance that you think that if you didn't take it, you wouldn't be where you are now?
Opportunity or chance. I think every time I push myself out there to walk into a door, if I'd gone through that summer and never ever reached out to that editor, I would have finished out the summer and gone back to LA, and who knows if I would have ever gotten into journalism. But I just have to listen to my internal voice on what do I need to do now. Often it's speaking up for yourself or saying, I've got a story idea, I've got something that needs to be heard. And I'm always amazed at the number of instances in which people, especially young people, just say nothing. Showing up is a huge part of it, but you need to make people aware that you're there and aware of your capabilities.
I'm Tamala Edwards from Action News, and you're watching OTN.
Action News anchorwoman Tamala Edwards volunteered her time today with aspiring journalists. She visited Bensalem High School to speak with students about their pursuits. They operate a student-run television station called Owl Television Network. Tamala gave the kids words of advice and encouragement on becoming young broadcast journalists.